Most people imagine medieval guilds as hubs of craftsmanship. They picture skilled artisans, proud of their work, protecting quality in a world before machines and factories. That image feels orderly, even wholesome. It comforts us. But it's not the full story. Guilds were far more than communities of artisans. They were power structures. They controlled markets, dictated prices, capped wages, and decided who could work and who could never even try. They didn't just influence trade, they shaped entire cities' economies with precision often exceeding that of kings. To understand this, you need to step into medieval Europe, roughly between the 11th and 15th centuries. Cities were growing after centuries of fragmentation. Trade was picking up, coin was back in daily life, but central authority was weak. Kings ruled more in name than action, law enforcement was patchy, and markets were unpredictable. In such an environment, some mechanism was necessary to create order, and guilds were that mechanism. Guilds were formally recognized associations of people practicing the same trade: bakers, weavers, masons, goldsmiths, carpenters. They were granted charters by city councils or monarchs, giving them monopoly rights over production and sale within city walls. In return, they promised stability, consistent quality, reliable pricing, trained labor, and support for members. At first, this system worked well. Guilds addressed real problems. They ensured bread wasn't watered down or tainted. They enforced standardized weights and measures. They trained apprentices in skills that could take years to master. They provided social support, covering funeral costs, illness, or loss of income. In a world without modern insurance or consumer protections, guilds built trust. That's the story that survives. What often gets overlooked is what happened once trust became power. Medieval guilds weren't early labor unions. They didn't protect workers from employers. Instead, masters, the shop owners, controlled guilds. They set rules, owned tools and workshops, and held political power. Workers had to follow their rules. Guilds dictated prices, banned undercutting, and punished those selling outside approved channels. Stability was the excuse. Monopoly was the result. In Florence, the Arte della Lana controlled the wool industry, deciding who could produce, quality standards, and prices. London's goldsmiths fixed metal purity, prices, and access to materials. Bread guilds set prices for staples, protecting bakers' profits while shifting risk to suppliers and laborers. Apprentices trained for years on minimal pay, and journeymen earned fixed wages. Opening a workshop required approval, fees, and connections. Talent mattered little without guild permission. In short, guilds maintained order but prioritized control and profit over fairness or free competition. Barriers to entry weren't accidental, they were deliberate. Apprenticeship fees increased over time, training periods lengthened, membership requirements became more stringent. Many guilds excluded women, migrants, religious minorities, and rural workers, not necessarily out of malice, but because keeping access limited protected the income and status of existing members. Here's the key takeaway. Guilds didn't restrict access because they were corrupt. They did it because monopoly power favors limitation. Once control over access exists, competition is the real threat, not exploitation. Guilds weren't just market regulators, they were political forces. Leaders of guilds sat on city councils, financed public works, and lent money to governments. In Florence, political office often required guild membership. Economic power and civic authority became intertwined, quietly and efficiently. Before central banks, guilds were part of the financial system. Their oversight created stability. Prices didn't swing wildly, production followed predictable cycles. Social unrest was mitigated by including members and excluding outsiders. The trade-off was clear: order for some, restricted mobility for others. This pattern is not unique to medieval Europe. It's a recurring theme in economic history. Institutions designed to prevent chaos often end up preserving the advantages of those already inside. Regulation begins as coordination. Coordination solidifies into control. Control becomes invisible because it's formalized into rules and normalized procedures. No one needs to wield swords. Authority works quietly through permission and procedure. This recurring dynamic explains why guild-like behavior appears whenever markets mature. In early, chaotic markets, innovation is rewarded. In stable, mature markets, protection is rewarded. The most successful aren't always the most skilled. They are the closest to the rule-making mechanisms. Once rules become sufficiently complex, they stop looking like power. They look like common sense. Inflation and inequality often rise together for the same reason. Limited access weakens competition. Weakened competition keeps prices high and wages low. Costs are passed downstream. Profits concentrate. The system appears natural because for those inside, it works as intended. Guilds mastered this centuries ago. They didn't need to exploit or enforce compliance with violence. They needed legitimacy. Recognition by city authorities made their control invisible. Market outcomes seemed natural. When people couldn't earn more, they blamed themselves, not the system. That internalization of barriers is perhaps the guild's most enduring legacy. Understanding how this works can be uncomfortable, but is essential for anyone thinking about money, work, and opportunity. Most people are taught that financial success comes from effort. Learn skills, work hard, increase productivity. Those things matter, but they are not the whole story. Real wealth formation has always depended on access to markets, to capital, to networks, to permission. Guilds made that explicit. Modern systems hide it. Here's the grounding truth. Guilds were neither villains nor heroes. They were rational institutions responding to incentives. They solved problems. Then they protected those solutions. Then they protected themselves. That's human behavior, not medieval eccentricity. History doesn't repeat exactly, but it does show patterns. And the pattern guilds reveal is simple. When economic order becomes rigid, mobility quietly dies. Not through revolutions, but through paperwork, regulations, and processes that look like routine steps. Recognizing this doesn't mean rejecting standards or oversight. It means understanding where power actually lies and how it quietly determines who can build wealth and who cannot. That belief persists today. If you can't achieve financial success, it's your fault. Rarely do people see the invisible structures shaping access and outcomes. This is where real financial understanding begins. Hard work and skill are necessary but not sufficient. Access to capital, networks, knowledge, and approval matters as much, if not more. Guilds codified that reality. Modern systems often obscure it, but the principle remains. Opportunity isn't equally distributed, it is structured. The takeaway is straightforward. Guilds didn't fail because they were amoral. They succeeded because they solved problems and then safeguarded the advantages those solutions created. They institutionalized inequality without needing to appear unfair. And the mechanisms they perfected, legitimacy, regulation, and controlled access, continue to shape modern markets. When you see the system for what it is, you stop blaming yourself for outcomes it wasn't designed to allow. Success isn't always about working harder. Sometimes it's about understanding the rules, knowing the gates, and figuring out how to access the spaces where wealth and opportunity are concentrated. That's where real financial freedom begins. If this changed the way you understand how power, access, and money operate, don't forget to click the button below to join for more explorations of history, finance, and human behavior. Every time you dig into these patterns, you equip yourself to navigate the systems that shape opportunity in ways most people never see.